So, you think you're Italian? Let's talk about that. Hey, what's up? I'm Rafael di Furia, aka Rafi D is me, back at it again. Let's get right into it on another beautiful Friday night. And before we get too deep into the video, if you want to see more content like this, be sure that you're subscribed with that notification bell turned on. And if you could give this video a like, I'd really appreciate it because it does help the channel grow. And don't forget, this is an open conversation, so feel free to leave any of your thoughts down below here on the YouTube comment section. If you haven't seen the last two videos that I've done, be sure to check them out because those are going to give this video a little bit more context. But in short, we've been talking about Italian citizenship and kind of what it is to be Italian and what that really means. But this time, I want to go into a little bit of a different direction rather than speaking about the legal point, because my main focus so far has really been on the legal aspect of being an Italian, of being eligible for Jure Sanguinis. Because from my perspective, while we may all on some level be Italian, we're just different flavors of Italian. After last week's videos across social media, there were tons and tons of messages of people expressing their love for their Italian identity, or people saying that they don't understand how people can feel Italian if they're not from here. There were a lot of really constructive conversations that happened. And when you broke all of these conversations down, it seemed to come into three themes. Firstly, the group of Italian Americans who are extremely proud of who they are and where they come from. And then there's a group of people, not just from Italy, who feel as though maybe they don't quite understand why that these people from abroad should be given the same rights as them. And then you have another small group of people who say, who cares? You do you. And I kind of fall into that myself. And there were a few questions that got into the discussion of what does it mean to be Italian? And I'm going to be doing a little bit of paraphrasing here. One person's comment stood out in particular. They almost sometimes become slightly offended when people say, oh, I'm Italian, when they're unable to point out where Rome is on a map, they don't speak Italian, and they've never been to Italy. In the Italian-American community, there's a discussion that seems to come up from time to time, especially in the Facebook groups out there about who's 100% Italian, oh, I'm only 50% Italian, a quarter, what are the percentages, who's more Italian? And when I see those conversations, I kind of start laughing to myself because the way that Italians in Italy feel is that, no, you're nobody. You're just those foreigners on the other side of the ocean. You're not one of us. But then you have these people who are extremely proud of their roots, proud of where they come from, their cultural identity, their ethnicity. But from an American perspective, identity is very important, and within the different ethnic groups that exist in the US. So, if you grew up anywhere in America, somebody asks you, where are you from? For many Americans, this doesn't mean where were you born, but where is your family from? What is your origin? What is your ethnicity? What is your nationality? So many Italian Americans grew up being told, oh, you're Italian. No, you're Italian. Oh, where are we from? We're from Italy. This is what we are and who we are. And my grandfather was extremely proud of his identity. He would sit me down from before I could walk, talk, anything, and he would say to me, there's two types of people. People who are Italian and people who wish they could be Italian. And you and me, we're Italian. And don't you ever forget that. And this wasn't out of any kind of supremacist feeling. That was just the way that he expressed his love for his homeland, Italy, and for his culture and ethnicity. This is just the pride that he had. And while Italians from abroad and Italians in Italy may have some cultural similarities, there are also a lot of differences. And this is just a fact. Yes, many Italian Americans have held on to our culture in some ways, but as the generations go on, things become lost. And even in the span of one generation, you can lose a lot. But when we're talking about culture, it depends on what kind of culture we're talking about. Americans are not going to know Italian pop culture from the 1980s because most of our families left way before that. Because the Italians who stayed in Italy would have progressed in one direction and the Italians who left would progress in a different direction. Not bad or worse or good or bad or better, just different. But there's part of the culture, for example, speaking with your hands, gesticulating, gesticulare. I was speaking with an Italian friend of mine and we were speaking in English, but I'm very accustomed to speaking with my hands. We were having a conversation in English and my friend said to me, what's going on here? We're speaking in English. How come we're talking like we're speaking in Italian? Sorry, this is just the way that I speak. This is just who I am. It's second nature. It's not something that I think about. But you're American. It's like, Italian American. There's a little bit of a difference. What I have noticed is it seems as though a lot of Italian Americans maybe have lost some of the meaning of the hand gestures that you would find in Italy. From what I've seen, the Italian system of hand gestures is far more complicated than probably what most of us have experienced in the US, even Italian Americans. It's an art form. Not all Italians are extremely expressive with their hands. I've even heard of Italians who really don't like to speak in this way. Personally, I think it adds to a conversation, but when you're doing it in a specific way. But the way that Italians do it, I think really adds to the conversation. You could be having a conversation with somebody talking about a long time ago you had some really delicious spaghetti and it was cooked perfectly. And here in Italy, I've heard a sentiment about Italian Americans or people of Italian descent from abroad, these fake Italians, people who think they're Italian, but they don't know. And hey, I'll give it to most people that there's a level of not knowing about the places and some aspects of the culture and some aspects of the food. Hell, there are even Italian Americans who think fettuccine Alfredo is a real thing. Yeah, no, not so much. But to call it Italian, we'll call it Italian inspired, because as time goes on, there has been a divergence where you have Italian culture and then Italian influenced culture. And even so much so that the Italian American identity is somewhat different than the Italian identity, I would say. And I know that's going to offend a lot of people. And culturally, even the descendants of Italians who live in America may not fit the Italian American stereotype. I know I don't. I didn't grow up in Brooklyn. I grew up on the West Coast. But the thing is, being Italian American, it's not anything less. It's just a way of being. And yes, there are a lot of Italian Americans when they come to Italy, they are not accepted as Italians, and this is just it. And I think it depends on the person's character and who they are, because there will be people who will be more accepted and less accepted. I've been pretty lucky, even though people will say, yeah, the American guy. But I've also been in conversations with Italians here from Italy who've said, yeah, but you're Italian, you're supposed to like this, or you're supposed to do X, Y, Z, and telling me you are Italian to me. I realize while there is an Italian influence on the way that I was raised and who I am, I'm never going to be fully Italian. I'm always going to have that little bit of Americanness in me because that's where I'm from. That's where I grew up. And I'm very grateful for the opportunities that gave me. But my own personal feeling was that it was time to come home. It was time to be here in the motherland. And somebody who commented on last week's videos, he's a regular viewer, Dax Presuto, mentioned something very interesting. People of Italian descent who go through this whole Jure Sanguinis thing really earn their stripes. They have to do a lot of work. As those of you who are going through this, I'm sure you know how much of a nightmare it can be and how stressful it can be. And I've seen so many people talking about the anxiety that they get through this whole process. It really is a big deal because for so many of us, this is a huge part of who we are, and this is pride. And for the people that actually want to come here, it's even more important to them because this really has an effect on their lives. Like Dax said, going through this process, you earn your stripes. You have to put so much work into it, blood, sweat, and tears. And yes, of course, I still want to see this process become easier, and I still want to try and help influence that if I ever can. And even though the process is far from perfect, I'm so grateful that it exists, because if it didn't, I probably more than likely wouldn't be sitting here in Italy right now. And I wouldn't be making these videos either. And I've really been enjoying making these because you guys have really made it worthwhile. So I wanted to also say thank you for that, just as a little side note, because it's really been a great experience getting to know some of you and even meeting up with you guys too. I think really when it comes down to it, legally, if you can prove you're Italian, you're Italian. But let's get back to the question of what really is Italian, because even in Italy, you have ethnic minorities born and raised here many generations that the first language is German, French, Slovenian, and may not ethnically be Italian. But their families have been here since forever. They've got the Italian citizenship. But does that mean they're Italian or that they're not Italian? Because from a legal sense, they're absolutely Italian. And then when you get into it, this might anger some people. But among Italians in Italy who are Italian or Italian Americans, Argentinians, whatever, many of our ancestors would have probably mixed with other different groups of people. Because you've had invaders of Italy from all over the place. Greek, North African, French, Austro-Hungarian, German. There have been so many groups of people that have come into this nation and have influenced it not only socially, but even genetically. So even to say among Italians, who's Italian? What does that mean? And then you'll find people who are here in Italy and they say it's the culture, the language, being in the place, living in the place, having been born in the place, having your family from this place. There was one person, I'm so sorry I forget your name, but they mentioned that they were born in Italy, but they were raised abroad. And when they come back to Italy, they're not considered to be Italian. But if you tell somebody from outside of Italy of Italian descent that they're not Italian, you're going to get little more than a vaff and have a nice day. So really, when it comes down to it, there's a lot of definitions of what Italian is, what it means. We can be talking about ethnicity, we can be talking about citizenship, we can be talking about culture, and all of the shades of gray in between. And there are so many different factors that none of this is really black and white. But maybe what might be right to say is Italian, thinking of somebody from Italy, or Italian descent, somebody who's from abroad. They are Italian. It's just a different kind of Italian. Anyway, I'm curious to what you guys think down in the comment section below here on YouTube. For those of you from Italy, what do you think about this situation? Do you really think that people who are not from Italy aren't Italian and can't be Italian in no way, no how? These people are complete foreigners? Or, okay, yeah, maybe they're of Italian descent. Maybe they've held on to some things. Or do you maybe think there's some sort of middle ground? And for the people who are not from Italy, but of Italian descent, how would you react if somebody told you that you're not Italian? Or have you ever been in the situation here in Italy, having somebody tell you you're not Italian? Or even asking you, how could you be Italian? You're from America. I think this subject is quite interesting, and I really hope that the conversation that might come from this will be just as constructive as it has over the past few weeks. Because from my perspective, while we may all on some level be Italian, we're just different flavors of Italian. Anyway, that's it until next Friday. Thank you so much for watching and subscribing. I really hope you enjoyed this video. And to see more content, be sure that you're subscribed with that notification bell turned on. And if you could give this video a like, I would really appreciate it because it does help the channel grow. As per usual, this is an open conversation, so feel free to leave any of your thoughts down in the YouTube comment section below, or feel free to get in contact over social media. And as always, I'm Rafael de Furia, aka Rafi D is me, and I'll see y'all next time. Later.